Okay, so we're meeting today to talk about the social studies curriculum for next year. I teach second, so I would focus on the second grade, and you focus on the fourth, even though you've kind of created the whole document.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to fill in, I don't know what you've done so far.
Okay. So what I've done so far, we're moving to a new curriculum. So I've added in some of the conceptual standards for the curriculum we're moving to, and I've also added the Arrow standards. So just to kind of give it an umbrella. So the new curriculum is the umbrella, and then the Arrow standards that we're using fit underneath it. So for grade 2, the conceptual standard is learners understand that humans form groups to protect and further their shared interests and maximize their access to limited resources. So the standards that you have that match for Arrow are relating stories about past events, people, places, or situations, and identify some ways of dealing with disagreements and to work better with others. And so it all kind of goes with the shared interest in maximizing access to resources.
Okay, so you incorporated the CDC standards with, you looked for standards in our Arrow that would match the CDC standard. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and some of them, there are 5 conceptual standards, and so for
Because they have bigger
ideas, right?
ideas, yeah.
So until I guess the school kind of changes the format and how they're going to do the 9 weeks or quarters, quarter 3 has 2 conceptual standards, but it also has 2 Arrow standards. So you can kind of play with that and break it up as need be, because it all goes together.
Okay.
It all end up working out that way.
Okay.
And so we've also decided to do, we have other events that we have to do in the school, like the UN Day. So for the UN Day, we can create a problem-based learning unit. And whatever the outcome we need for the culmination on the UN Day, we'll be working towards that as we
towards
do our quarter 1
towards
standards.
the conceptual standard.
Right. So, say for example, I think UN Day is Turn the World Blue or Light Up the World. It's something along those lines. I have to double check. Instead of us having to do our standards and then doing another activity, we would connect what we're doing in social studies to the outcome that we're going to display on UN Day. And that's kind of what we're here doing. So we're almost working backwards based on the UN theme. How can we fit our standards to give us an outcome for that and have the students learn at the same time?
Okay. So creating the activities around the events and the standard.
Right.
That fit the standard.
Correct.
Okay. So UN, for example, is it in the first 9 weeks?
Yeah, it's October 24th. We celebrated the actual day, I believe, in November, but the actual UN Day is the 24th.
Okay, so the first quarter you're working towards.
Exactly.
That, okay.
So that way you're not rushing that second quarter to hurry up and just get something done. You already have your product that the kids are learning, and then you just move on with your curriculum because your children will be well versed in what they've learned by the time it's time to present the information.
And other events like UN Day, we have African American History Month.
That's the second quarter.
Okay.
So yeah. So for the first quarter, it's UN Day. Second quarter is African American History. And this is actually interesting because for quarter 3 we have the Francophone, and next year they're moving to where we have the assemblies starting in January, and it's kind of a big thing where you use all of the specialists and the core classes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so instead of having the assemblies that we have where we just do the goofy stuff, we are actually going to work with art, music, PE.
To like showcase the
like they did for the spring concert. And there'll be no spring concert, just a winter concert, and then our assemblies per grade level.
Okay.
And it ends up being a museum
useful.
and not so much an assembly.
So then and they start in quarter 3.
Yeah, so the Francophone is in quarter 3, and so I guess the assemblies or the museums that they're thinking about will go throughout second to fourth quarter. That's what I'm assuming.
And that will incorporate. So this is not relative.
Yeah, it's cross-curricular. So
it's cross-curricular. Okay.
So everybody works together to display what
Everything
they've learned.
done. Okay. So we're gonna have to use the standards to create that. Okay, that's better.
Yeah, it should be fun. I think it's all going to work out pretty well. And then for quarter 4, we have the science fair or invention convention, whatever they decide to do. And it's interesting because the CGC standard, it says learners understand that innovation in all areas, including technology, cultural norms, and social models, can give a group an advantage over other groups. And the standards for the arrow just happen to be production, distribution, and consumption, science, technology, and society. So it all ended up fitting together when we actually have the science fair. So
Satisfy their needs. Yeah.
right. So whatever people are working on in the fourth quarter,
Systems.
right, they have like a month or so to continue their work, and then they can present it at the invention convention or science fair.
Great.
So it all
And
works
it's
out.
also cross-curricular.
Right. Almost everything with the problem-based learning will be cross-curricular. So the one thing about creating these units is that, say you find a math concept that goes into one of these, you can actually combine your social studies in your math lesson, and then that be covered
You're
for
covering the standard during your math.
right. Or reading some of it.
Yeah.
Might, everything can kind of go in, and that's the good thing about problem-based learning, because everything is kind of included in it. So it works out fairly well. And this is not including the science, because sometimes science and social studies could go together as well, depending on what you're looking at.
Okay. So are we going to set up this not the units, but the activities today?
We can set up one. Well, we won't get to all the units because that'll take 1,000 years. But we can start with the UN Day one. So we'll work backwards. We'll look at what the theme is for UN Day, and we'll look at the standards that we have for our grades, and then we can move backwards and create almost like a scenario or a problem based on what the UN Day theme is, and then our culminating activities will be reflective of the outcome that we want the kids to learn. So if we want them to put on a display, if we want them to build something, we'll move backwards from what we want them to do, and then
Okay. And so it'll be one main project for each quarter?
right for each quarter, and that's it.
Okay.
So we have 4 throughout the year. Yeah, 4.
It's good because then you
Or
work
5
towards
little ones. Yeah.
both things.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And the kids are still learning, and you can just get some standards taught in between there, because we don't have a lot of time with social studies and science,
Yeah.
and so that way everything.
Will we have the same amount of time next year?
We have. I guess it depends on the
Well, I
grade.
guess
I don't know how
Also,
they're.
if you cross.
If you cross over, then you'll have enough time.
Yeah.
So if you do, say for example, there's something in the social studies that we want to teach that happens to be a reading activity, we can put that within the reading, and then we'll still have our social studies time to cover what we need to do on the social science end, but we've done the majority of what we need to do in reading.
Okay. Okay.
Started talking about downstairs. Can we agree that whatever it is we decide, that the framework is across the curriculum for all grades? So, in other words, if
Yes, it should be.
Yes, but remember how we talked about moving things around if we see fit? If we do that, we're not going to be learning anymore.
Well, I thought that was what we were trying to avoid.
we need to
Yeah, but
avoid
we did talk about moving
Yeah,
things.
like how some people want to move things back and
But
forth.
because if we do move them, then we are not being aligned anymore.
No, not across. No, we
I
wouldn't.
think that's important.
But
I think
so-
it's important that if the benchmarks that we are covering, let's say, and this was the example we used downstairs, if we're teaching whales and rainbows, and you want to teach whales and rainbows in September,
for?
and I want to teach them in
May.
May, then we need to be figuring out a way that it works so that we can all teach those things at the same time. The reason I think that's important is because if we are a community and we're talking at a school this size, that kind of thing really should be simple.
It should.
And if we can come to the school as a parent and see the whales and rainbows on your bulletin board and what that looks like in kindergarten, and then get into second or first grade and see what that looks like. Oh, okay, so yeah, I can see them talking about it. And then, then you've got kids who can walk past the bulletin board from first graders going past the kindergarten. I remember that from last year, and now I know what I'm learning this year. And they can really make the connection from one year to the next.
Well, it probably should be like that anyways, right?
Right?
It should be.
It should
And
be.
so
In
I
every,
think
don't
if
be all
we're,
the same thing.
class. I mean, in every also.
In every- I mean,
like
I would
arts,
argue
math,
if
science.
it's social studies and science, it should be that way. Language, it should be that way. Math, it can't possibly be that way because it's so different from year to year. But in language arts, if we're all working on biographies at the beginning of the year, and you got Harriet Tubman down in first grade, and I've got Harriet Tubman up in fifth grade, and like the difference in the literature and doing book buddies, like that's how that ties in and how we can all kind of be on the same page. And then there's really no room for that disconnect between
Right.
first and second to third to fourth, because we're just all working on it at the same
But
time.
it's not too much repetition
No, yeah.
Well,
I'm
no,
not saying repetition, I'm saying
from
like
each grade
a
level
block.
to it.
it's gonna look different regardless.
Well, yeah.
I mean, for the
because
grade, because the content
I'm
and
saying
things are different.
wells and rainbows, but the benchmark would be time continuity and change, or connections and conflict. And we can like narrow in on what we're going to teach for that piece.
But no, that's what's
Broad.
No, but that's what's in. That's how I
The
set it up
CBC.
the way I did. Like on this, sorry, on the like for quarter one. That's why I put quarter one standards in quarter two, and that's going to be time, continuity, change, connections, and conflict. So we have 2 standards, but there are 5 different things in there that we can talk about.
Do that.
No, we
need
can just
to
figure out a
figure
way
it
to
out.
be creative with the standards that we have, and then think of something
But
from
then
there.
for me, it's like pulling it by the teeth again.
No, well, the thing
Why?
is, you don't have to use all your standards. You can use one of the indicators
For that.
for the UN project. So it can just be a piece of the bigger thing that you want to do for that unit. It doesn't have to include every single standard. It can just cover one. And I think that's,
too. So.
yeah, or one of the 2. And I think that's what made it so
I mean,
difficult
we don't have many.
this year. Right.
Social studies, kindergarten standards are like
Awesome.
5.
Yeah,
1,
it's-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Right, it
That's
doesn't.
it.
Nothing gets
I think
taken
it
until
starts
the
in
end.
second.
Yeah,
Right.
you see. So we don't have much actually.
But you can have give examples of conflict and cooperation among individuals and groups. That goes right along with the UN of promoting peace and human rights.
Yeah. So.
So what has happened maybe since it's individual in their environments, like how in their environment do they represent promoting peace? And it seems like it's very small scale, but for kindergarten it's a big deal for them to learn how to cooperate and to resolve conflicts. And of course,
So
it's
is the UN? Sorry, the theme is that peace?
turn the world blue.
What does that mean? Turn the world blue.
It's just
I don't
Promoting
get it.
peace, development, and
yeah.
human rights. That's
You
what
probably
it
have to
says.
give that little blurb
Yeah.
to teachers.
Yeah, no,
To
it'll
explain
have
that.
nothing to do with this. No, what I'm saying is that we don't have to hone in on a topic. But if we're going to say, okay, well, UN Day, we know that whatever we're working towards at the end of the unit is going to be represented somewhere here in UN Day. To me, I have to kind of see where I'm going with something. So whether I want to put it in a video, whether the kids are going to put on some type of performance, like I need to know, but that's where we're going, because you can do that throughout the unit using your standards instead of waiting until you get to the last minute and then recreating something. That's the point of us putting an event. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like, hey, we need to do this, and no.
And you know what, then you have less chance of overlap with that, because
You already know
I
what
was
other
so
people are
stressed
doing.
out,
You
yeah.
collaborate with other grades.
And then when you know ahead of time, even when you see something, oh, I better,
Yeah.
I'll need
You
this
can
a
just
month
throw it-
later.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
you start planning.
Happen to you. How are your tribes going to solve these problems? So they spend the entire 9 weeks working together as a tribe. Sometimes they get split, sometimes they don't. A culminating event can be creating a storyboard about what happened during each one of their parts of this journey.
Timeline. Right.
Yeah. And the storyboard is another way of a timeline. So when someone comes in the classroom, they can literally click on the computer and something will pop out about what the kids did and what they learned. That can be their presentation, like for UN Day. So my outcome would be a storyboard. However that gets set up in the UN Day presentation, however they
Decided
put
by
it.
the committee.
Right. But this means that I can now plan for computer lab time. I can give maybe children access to passwords. If the school needs to buy the storyboarding software, we can all get that done. But if I know this is my final product, then the kids can be working on that as they go along. So some days it'll be an activity in the classroom, but then they might go to the computer lab to do something else. There might be books in there for language arts that I can now add these in. That's kind of where I'm like, when you think about the unit, it's just something simple like that.
Okay, so let's.
That's what I'm
The two of us, we sat together, and because there's this quarter thing, and so we sat there and we said, okay, how can we summarize this in like 2 words or something? So I think like our first word was
Or into
forming
essential
groups.
questions.
I think, yeah, like forming groups. I mean, you have to come up with that.
Yeah, like you can either, what I did, I just used what they had
So
on Arrow.
for us, was I
Arrow.
think it was forming groups.
So if you want to put that, like, and that's fine. It's however, because I know pre-K and K, well, pre-K doesn't have a program at all, so they use the K program.
We usually work together.
Exactly. So you can use the arrow, time, continuity, and change, or you can put, and then the colon, forming groups. And then that's what you're working on. So when people see like, oh, they're talking about change, and oh, they're talking about how people form groups, how to work together. You can be more specific if you like, but it doesn't have to be like a full-fledged, like you're right, 2 words, maybe 3 words to describe what you're going to be covering. That's it. Like that's fine. For the one that William sent
But
out.
that's a completely different document. That has nothing
It
to do
is.
with what we're meeting here
But
today.
what
Let
is
me show
good
you
about it,
that.
I remembered it because we summarized every unit in like just 1 word.
Yeah, no,
1,
and
2
that's
words.
fine too. Yeah,
But then, if you do that, then it sort of gives you, okay, how can I connect that to peace development and human rights for kindergarten? So, you know, if in quarter 1 we're talking about why people form groups.
Well, the one that CGC gave us is an immigrant curriculum.
Yeah, but it's like upper school. I mean, they
Yeah.
give us examples of upper school. Everything's
No,
upper
it
school.
can be. It can be.
No,
It
they
can
had
be,
examples
but
for
I
second
think
grade.
they
you have to do a lot of the
They had examples
either
for second
water, a lot of
grade,
water
Dawn.
down or a lot of filling in, and I mean, but for you all,
But to describe the unit is not the same as to create.
So, for
An
example,
outcome.
like here we go, guiding questions.
So that's what we need to do, just
Exact-
describe the unit.
Oh,
right?
is that what we're here to do? I thought it
well,
was.
I was here to bounce ideas so we can help each other create like ideas for the unit.
What can we do? She wanted like the content.
Yeah,
Like
so it doesn't
ideas,
have to be to the
activities.
T, but
Yeah.
like I know I want to do a
Okay.
storyboard. I know I want my kids to have some type of tribal understanding. I
So an
want-
outcome.
Yeah, so I just